If you follow him at Sean_Barnard1 on X or Twitter, whatever the hell you want to call it. I told you before, he has his own media company, which I love. I can collaborate, Pick Swap Media. Make sure you're checking that out. Writes for Sixers Digest. Obviously, reporter in NBA Insider for Fox Sports The Gambler. Obviously, Sean doesn't want to return my phone calls anymore, but now just all kidding aside, love you, Sean, as always. But this dude is on it all the time. He's running wild. He was doing things all night. So I'm going to bring him on. Man, Sean, so much love for you for joining this program, man. You've been doing everything tonight on the Sixers game.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Tony. Appreciate that intro and for the opportunity to have me on as a whole. Huge fan of everything you got going on as well, and been following your work for a long time. So an honor to be on here and excited to talk this Sixers team, which has been more fun than I expected going into the year for sure.
Man, you don't have to thank me. Listen, I say this all the time. You're a young guy, man. I'm 45, so I'm like middle-aged. I hate to say that. Like, it scares me a little bit when I say middle-aged, but at the same time, I respect the grind of individuals like yourself, because I know for myself, like, I got in this game late, and I understand what you have to do and what you have to sacrifice in order to get to that next level. Like, I think people laugh all the time, and you'll chuckle with this because you're finding this out. It's like, everybody's like, oh man, these radio dudes, man, they're loaded. They get this, they get that. I'm like, bro, you understand? Number one, they're like the last people to get tickets. Number two, what do they get? $40 to do a radio show sometimes, if that. Like, bro, it's passion, man, and you have it, man. I respect that. You do a hell of a job, man. You really do.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's a huge compliment. And for sure, it's long hours. It's a lot of grind and a lot of work when no one's watching as well. There's a lot of that stuff behind the scenes that goes into it that I think a lot of people take for granted. But you know what? I do love the grind. I wouldn't want it any other way, and happy to kind of get it out the mud and dig it out for myself for sure.
Yeah, man, it's great. And I like how you have a lot of different things going for yourself. I mentor a couple people. I said all the time, don't put all your eggs in one basket, because unfortunately it's a very volatile industry and things happen, and you always want to have a pivot. You always want to have an outlet, and you always want to build yourself too. I say this to people a lot, make sure there's something in it for you, because you will get used and abused in this world too if you're not sure. If you're, you could get the wool thrown out behind you really, really quick. But let's get right into this, because I like how you opened up, because I didn't expect to have this much fun this year watching the 76ers. I was a former season ticket holder. I gave up my season tickets because I was so annoyed that I put so much passion in the last couple years, and I was just completely distraught. And I started to get sucked back in. Number one, I'm doing some work for the Blue Coats, so I start paying more attention, and I'm like, wow, Nick Nurse, I've always been a fan, but he has these guys playing such a different way. And I think that's what's hopefully, now we're going to get into the injury, but I think that's hopefully going to prolong the ability for Joel to play a couple extra years in this system.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as the Joel conversation as a whole, I've always said, like, for starters, it's incredibly impressive that after winning MVP last year, we're seeing him play better basketball in every single area, averaging more points, more assists, more rebounds, more blocks, and more steals in fewer minutes than last year. That just does not happen. And a lot of that is a credit to Nick Nurse with the motion and offense, the different sets, the different opportunities and passes for him to make that were not there in past years. And I do think this extends his window, that we're seeing him play a different way. And one of the things that I've always thought was interesting about Joel Embiid is he's obviously an all-time great and a guy, one of the most impressive talents that I've ever seen on a basketball court. But I do think that there's a world where I think the championship window is a little bigger than people give him for granted. That I think there's a world where the best version of Joel Embiid might be a little bit past the prime of him, where it's not him scoring 35 points per game, where it might be him in a little more reduced offensive role, where he's dominating on the boards, being this force defensively that we see him when he is locked in on this side of the ball. So it's really impressive the steps that he's taken in every area of his game this year. And for starters, it starts with him buying in, and the rest of the team is absolutely followed. So huge shout out to Nick Nurse, huge shout out to Joel Embiid for embracing things. And he's taken his game to levels which I don't think anybody thought he could go to.
Yeah, I fully agree with you there, man. I do. I think, one of the biggest things for Joel this year, I was one of them dudes that was like finally like bro, you got to get off social media. Like, stop going back and forth with the fans. Stop all the shenanigans. Just be a basketball player. Like, that's all you need to do, because you're so good, man. You're so good. And I think, getting married, having a child, he had the maturation of Joel Embiid this year is extremely impressive. And, like you said, people are going to follow, right? That's your leader. They're going to follow. Now, my man Adam checking in says, Sean, how many years do you think Joel have to win a championship? So let's start. Like, what's that window for you? I said 3 years. When I came in this year, I said 3 years. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think I would go a little longer than that. So he's 29 right now, going to turn 30 this year, which is crazy considering, remember this guy's infancy of his NBA career and when he first came to the league as. But he is going to be 30 this year, and we're still seeing him progress. And the biggest thing to me that extends the window is this guy, Tyrese Maxey, that there's now a player to hand the reins off a little bit to, and that feeds right into this reduced role that I can still see him filling at a very high level. That there are some inherent issues that we're seeing in the modern NBA with building around a big man, that there's just some difficulties for creating shots for him because there's just different ways to defend when there is a post-oriented player. Now, to Joel Embiid's credit, he's done a great job of combating this by becoming one of the most lethal mid-range shooters in the entire league, having some shot creation skills where he's able to put the ball on the floor. But there are difficulties when it is a big man. Now, when you have a guard to pair with him, like Tyrese Maxey, who continues to get better and better on a night in and night out kind of process, even a night like tonight, I think was a significant step forward in his development without Joel Embiid there. So I think having Maxey as like this number 2 or this guy that is still early in his developmental arc for what he's going to be as a player really does extend that window. So to full out answer the question, I think I would probably put it closer to like the 5-year range for what the window is. Now that, again, that could change with one wrong step or one wrong injury. And that's kind of the balancing act that there is with Joel Embiid. But I do think that the window is a little longer than people give it credit.
I listen, you're very positive about it, and I hope you're right. I do. So the reason why I bring it up is it scares me. Like, the knee already scares me. I think we're underplaying it, man. I really do. I hate to say it, but we do. And I'm a proponent right now. I say sit them to the All-Star break. Like, seriously, like this is a marathon, not a sprint. Like, just sit them. We don't just put them out, put them down, let them get right, because we need him long term. And I don't care about beating some of these teams, right? It doesn't. And I think in the NBA we get too carried away with seeds and this and that. The East is up for grabs. I don't think it's a runaway. We could very easily get one of the top 4 seeds, in my opinion. And I just think that, in my thoughts, that you sit him, you get it right, and you take some of that concern out, because right now, man, there's a lot of concern. What do you think about it? Is that a little too drastic, or do you think they should start to look at something like that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'll start by saying that my ears are also a little bit perked up for what exactly is going on, that there has not been the most concrete evidence from the Sixers. They've been pretty hush-hush about things. That we saw the ankle injury, which occurred against the Raptors, where he rolled that. That was very clear that happened. He missed a couple games, missed Christmas because of that. Then he comes back, and then the most recent stretch of games that he's missed has been listed as left knee soreness or left knee swelling. So there hasn't been a diagnosis or what the specific injury is beyond that. I would love to see more information on that before there's some sort of decision made. I'm sure they obviously have access and are much more well-informed with this kind of thing. But I don't disagree with your overall premise of one of the, I guess, lingering conversations in this is, of course, MVP. We know Joel Embiid coming off the MVP last year, that the NBA has put in these standards where you have to play 65 games to qualify for these awards. Now, I will say that he is still on pace for this at this current time. And I do think that means something to Joel. I've been pretty sympathetic with things that I do like when guys care about winning awards and having those accolades, because at the end of the day, those do matter in a way that I don't think people give credit. That when it is the end of your career and you're hanging up that final jersey and looking at your full bullet points of what you did, you do want those MVPs, those defensive player of the years, all those things. But in the grand scheme of things, what really matters is, of course, a championship. So if sacrificing a potential run at MVP, and the disappointing part about this is that if the season ended today, I likely think Joel Embiid is the MVP of the NBA right now. But by sacrificing that and putting in the team first and giving the team the best chance to make a run, that finals MVPs are a little bit sweeter. So I do agree with your overall thought process, but I would like to have a little bit more information on what exactly he is dealing with.
Listen, I like it, and I respect it, but I'll tell you what, man. For me personally, if I find out that Joel Embiid is worried more about a personal accolade than
Sure.
actually getting to the finals, I'm gonna flip, man. I really am. I get it, I understand it, but we've been through too much here, and we finally. I feel like this is almost like a reset, right?
Hmm.
Because we've tried so many. I still say, and I'll continue to say that the best opportunity I thought we had to win was with Jimmy Butler. And I still think that we've continued to screw up year in and year out with giving away assets and picking the wrong guys and signing the wrong guys. And now we actually have a chance, right? Cap room, assets. I don't want to screw it up. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking to myself, like, this is a kind of like a reset. And so talking about that, do you feel that they will use those assets at the deadline? No, I've been following you seem like you're becoming receptive to the DeJounte Murray talks.
Hmm.
I agree with you. I'd much rather have Murray over Levine. Not a huge Levine guy. But I also saw you tonight. I thought it was very interesting. Say it looks like Nick Nurse is losing trust in his backup centers in Mo Bamba and in B-Ball Paul. And listen, you said the great thing. Go small. Marcus Morris gives you no rim protection whatsoever. So looking at all of that, I know it's a loaded question, but trade deadline, do you think they try to address the little pieces, or do you think they get crazy and go all in?
Yeah, so a couple things here for the backup center stuff. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that Nick Nurse doesn't have a strong confidence in B-Ball Paul or Mo Bamba, and for good reason for both, for being honest. That we know what B-Ball Paul is and the ups and downs, the roller coaster that is him as a basketball player. Tonight was the second time this season I've seen immediately Paul Reed do kind of a just over the top play where he tried to go coast to coast, and then Nick Nurse immediately with the hook getting him out of the game. Mo Bamba is very frustrating to me because he's such like a theoretical player that in theory, he's perfect for what you want in a backup center. He's a good shooter. He's real deal 7 foot, 7'10" wingspan, should be able to be a good rebounder, should be able to block shots. But there's moments that like it just leaves you wanting more, that he just has not been concrete good enough for this team. And then when you shift to Marcus Morris at the 5, who is more talented offensively than either of these options, but he gives you pretty much zero on the defensive end. And I thought that showed face in tonight's game and was one of the major reasons for the loss. I get it that neither Mo Bamba or Paul Reed are perfect, but they at least provide some sort of rim protection or some sort of defensive effort in a way that Morris just straight up doesn't. So I think that could potentially be something that Daryl Morey looks to address at the deadline. But I do think that there are bigger pieces that should be in play. And one of the just sticking points that the Sixers continue to echo is this thought process behind cap space, that they want to put themselves in a unique position where the Sixers are, as of now, slated to have the second most cap space in the entire NBA this summer, trailing only the Orlando Magic there. And they are in a unique spot because they have an MVP caliber player in Joel Embiid, an up-and-coming star with Tyrese Maxey, and then basically a blank slate to paint this roster as they see fit. So I think Daryl Morey is really committed to that. And when you look at the James Harden trade, the common denominator between the players coming back with Nico Batum, with Robert Covington, with Marcus Morris and KJ Martin, those are all guys on expiring deals that I don't think Morey's ready to sacrifice that. But for me, I'm kind of the mindset where you strike where the iron's hot. And if you have an opportunity to compete this year, you absolutely do it. And DeJounte Murray's a guy on a long-term contract. But for me, I'm willing to bite that and take that I would rather one player that you have than kind of this theoretical players you could get. Because while this cap space plan is great, it only works if players actually come. And when you look at the track record of the Sixers organization, not particularly stellar for bringing in free agents. So I personally am more prone to striking now. I am concerned that Daryl Morey is a little more comfortable sitting back.
I think it's a great point. I could not agree with you more. I say all the I love to hear you say that, because what you say makes perfect sense. It's so much easier to, especially when you understand the logistics of the cap structure of the NBA, to re-sign your own, to have, so you trade for this guy, you work out the extension, you work out the deal, and boom, make sure he wants to play here. You never know, man. Like, if you wait to the offseason, you don't know where these guys are going to go. They want to form big threes, they want to super teams. I mean, you have no idea. So I'm with you. I strike while the iron's hot. I think that, especially right now, a lot of chemistry on this team. So, but that also works the other way too. Are you afraid that, you mentioned some good names, like I already thought we got trash back from Harden, but we really didn't. We got a lot of good role players, really good that we desperately needed. Now, do you think though that we could mess up the chemistry on this team if we start getting rid of some of those expiring contracts and bringing some new guys here for the stretch run?
Yeah, the guy that I think is front and center in this conversation is Tobias Harris. That we've been through. It feels like Tobias Harris has been here for 50 years, and we've been complaining about the
Poor
contract
guy.
every single second. And now, like, the light is finally at the end of the tunnel for that contract coming off the books, that he's now an expiring deal. But then at the same time, like, if you want to bring up Zach LaVine on the hook for 4 more years at close to $200 million, making about $40 million a year. So if you're in theory, like, Zach LaVine is a much better fit and a better player than Tobias Harris. But do you really want to commit to that type of money when you're just getting off this deal? So there's the balance with that too. And then you bring in the vibes and the personality, the chemistry. Tobias Harris is pretty vital to this team in that regard, that he is a leader on the team. He is a guy that's a good locker room guy, a good clubhouse guy, and a guy that has taken a lot of these other players under his wing. So you kind of run that risk of messing up that. And again, like, I would hope that there's Daryl Morey, I would say, is not a guy that buys into the chemistry for the most part, that he's much more of the data, the analytics, and the talent standpoint, that talent wins out. But I think he's learned a little bit of a lesson about that during his time in Philadelphia, seeing the Ben Simmons stuff and seeing the way the James Harden, Doc Rivers kind of clash played out, all these different things. So I think he's a little bit more prone to this year, once again, being careful, not messing up the chemistry, not messing up the vibes. And my ultimate, I guess, frustration with that is I don't think that leads to a championship. So I do hope he gets more active than that, but I do think Morey's more content with sitting back and watching than people want to be the case.
Yeah, and it's funny because I never thought of him as that kind of guy. And it's funny, and I know you go all world and you go 4 for 4. And again, we're talking live on the Rise of Rack Media line. We're talking to the fantastic Sean Barnard. You can follow him at Sean_Barnard1, does tremendous work. Now runs his own Pick Swap Media. You hear him on Fox Sports The Gambler, Sixers Digest, Philly Sports Network. He's all over X. Make sure you find great information. And it's funny because I look at it and I say to myself, again, we always wind up loving the player who exceeds potential, and then he gets exposed when we put him out there way too much or have a huge reliance on him. And that guy to me is Kelly Oubre Jr., which I think, again, you mentioned it tonight, relying on him to be too much. If he is who he is, fantastic. Even if he gives you about 10% more over production, but to have a guy that you're relying on consistently, we see it all the time. And I brought up the Phillies number one because we thought when Dombro came here as a GM, he was always a guy to give up all that young talent and go, and he hasn't done it at all. Complete flip the script. Morey, I think, is flipping the script. And then when you talk about guys on the Phillies that we overexpose and play too much, it feels like the same thing here with the Sixers with Oubre. I mean, is this just now because he's trying to fill a void with Joe's been lingering injuries and not playing all the time? Or is it that we're starting to rely on him way too much?
Yeah, we're definitely catching it at a bad time here because I do think that was the worst Kelly Oubre Jr. game that we've seen in a Sixers uniform thus far. That 32 minutes tonight, had 7 points, 3 rebounds, 3 of 11 from the field, 0 for 3 from 3, and had a really bad foul in crunch time as well. That was low IQ play that just can't happen. Now, Kelly Oubre Jr. was a slam dunk signing. Getting him at a veteran's minimum is ridiculous value for a guy that was a 20-point scorer in the NBA last year. He's the only player to score 20 points per game last year and get a veteran's minimum. That everyone else got a pretty healthy payday. And I think he's carrying that chip on his shoulder as well. But it is nights like tonight that you see, like, he can be overexposed when there's too much opportunity. And I also think he's a guy that looks so much better when Joel Embiid's on the floor, that he's found a real nice knack for making these backdoor cuts, getting feeds from Joel Embiid. And also, we talk so much about the dunker spot throughout the years with Ben Simmons, with PJ Tucker. It's refreshing to have a guy like Kelly Oubre with some legitimate touch and some legitimate athleticism around the rim. So I think he's been awesome in that role. I love what Kelly brings to this team, but on nights like tonight, you do see that, like, he's not the guy that you can just toss next up in the lineup. He is what he is. He's great for what he is, but he's not the cure-all in the way that I think a lot of people wish.
I agree, man. I agree. Now, this my man, Al, he gets so good. Joe's going to play Friday. He'll be fine. Listen, Al, I hope you're right, man. Like, I'm just saying, I'm concerned. It's a valid concern. It says Kelly will be fine. That's just, yeah, we know that. But the problem is, like Sean saying, I'm saying, I think eventually we have to find a better mix and not rely on him so much. Now, I got to ask you, because I feel like we're in a good spot when we talk about young talent. I saw you down at the Chase Fieldhouse a couple weeks ago. You were down there. I saw you tweeted out watching some of those young guys play. And I'll tell you what, for me, starting to do some work for them and do the podcast and talk to the players, there is some tremendous young talent down there. Like just dudes who want to jump off the floor, like out the building, like a Ricky Council, right? We watch it. I mean, that dude is absolutely talented, man. And I feel good. I actually feel good. Now, obviously, the two-way thing works. You know, you saw, you know, it could work in a negative way. But if we can get these guys up, you know, Jaden Springer, right? I like what Coach said today, man. Like, he's got to make shots, right? It's got to make shots, right? Yeah. So when you look at this young talent, which I love the G League for that specifically, you know, what's your focus on, you know, with some of these guys as the years go on with this team?
Yeah, for starters, I think the Sixers deserve a lot of credit for building up this young talent with very little assets, that even a year like this year with 0 draft picks to work with and pulling in Terquavion Smith, Ricky Council IV, those are the two guys that have stuck from this. Bringing in Kenny Lofton, who I like quite a bit, is a really fun player. Terquavion Smith is my guy that I've loved him since college at NC State. I had him as a first-round talent dating back to the first time he kind of stuck his feet in the draft. I think he made I guess, poor kind of judgment in the way he handled his draft process by going back to school and then saw his stock drop a little bit. Frankly, I give that way more about the situation. I thought playing next to Jarkel Joyner at NC State that they were a little repetitive in their skill sets. But the bottom line is I think Terquavion Smith is a guy that I think he's a legitimate NBA player and will be fairly shortly. That I think the Sixers are taking the right route by having him develop at the Blue Coats. And Ricky Council IV, I won't say is a guy that I was overly excited about. I like his game. I was impressed with his game. But I'm very impressed with lately seeing the jump shot improve, seeing some of his form improve. Those were all things that I was more concerned about than I think the majority of people. That I think there was like a pretty legitimate hitch in his shot from his college days. That looks pretty fixed to me. So these are all really good signs. And that is nice that they're bringing them along in this right way. I do think like the Sixers have done a really nice job starting to establish this pipeline of when you have these young players, you give them a little time to develop, you start putting a little more on his plate. And there are guys that far exceed things, such as a Tyrese Maxey, who's worlds beyond what you could ever expect to at this point. And there's guys that take it a little slower, like a Jaden Springer, who's taking his time to develop. And with Springer, I see some pessimism on like his developmental track. You got to think this kid's still 21. Like there's rookies this year that are older than Jaden Springer. So just keep that in mind when you are judging him. But I do think the Sixers have done a nice job starting to create this pipeline of having a direct two-way to the real roster, to rotation pieces or potential trade chips, because those are valuable as well. When you do have young, intriguing talents, sometimes those are the sweeteners that it takes to get a deal done. So I do give Daryl Morey a lot of credit for that. And I do think that they've done an impressive job bringing in young talent without a lot of assets to get them.
Well, I'll say two things. Number one, you could tell that now, like all off the track of the Sixers, just by yourself, how talented you are. Number one, because you got Turk's name right, which I can't. And number two, I mean, listen, you're talking about players at NC State. Like, who am I getting on this program that's spitting off an NC State roster, man? I'm being honest. Like, I am. I'm in awe. I love that. Let me ask you this real fast, because I will get you. You've had a long night. I'm not going to keep you forever. The whole Tyrese Maxey thing, at Doc Rivers with the whole on the Bill Simmons show, because we all thought about it, right? We all thought I mean, Tyrese was pretty heartfelt when his reply in his own pod was like he was having issues with it, man, mentally, calling his mom saying, I think I should be out there. I mean, what does that say to everybody that was on the Doc Rivers side of when we used to say, listen, he doesn't play young players. I mean, this is what Doc does. I mean, did it finally come out now and show that we kind of were right a little bit?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And that the most specific, I guess, glaring just craziness at this point is Doc Rivers. I still remember when the decision was first made that Tyrese Maxey came off the bench for 19 games last year. That is absurd that actually happened. And when it first happened, this was after he broke his foot, that he was starting to come back from that. D'Anthony Melton had slid in the starting lineup and was playing well. But then there was the conversation where Doc Rivers went to the media and said that Tyrese Maxey texted him and said he was willing to come off the bench to help the team and all this, which just straight up didn't happen. And then Tyrese Maxey took to his own podcast, the Maxey on the Mic, which is an iHeart podcast that I do a little bit of work with as well, and basically said like that did not happen, that I was not willing to to work on that, or did not happen at all. So I like that Tyrese at least kind of was outspoken with that, spoke his mind. And yeah, Doc Rivers, once again, like, I can't believe I've been more frustrated in the post Doc Rivers coaching era, but the amount of microphones that have been put in front of his face, every time he says something, it frustrates me. So I'm glad he's out of the Sixers world, but we cannot escape that man.
No, we can't. You're right, man. Please stop putting those mics up there, man. He's not here anymore, man. Like, all you're doing is create more animosity. Like, I get it. You want the media, you want them to talk and spark, but it's got to stop. It's got to stop. You're making us nuts. Sean, listen, man. Before you go, I think I've covered everywhere you go, but I just found out I didn't know anything about the Max and the mic thing that you do some work for. What do you got going on coming up? Let everyone know where they can find you besides on social media.
Yeah, once again, appreciate you having me on in the first place, and for the
Sure,
platform
man.
as a whole. And yeah, you can follow me on X or Twitter, as you mentioned, at Sean_Barnard1. You can check out on YouTube, Pick Swap Media, Sixers Digest, as well as the Fox Sports The Gambler page down there. And to catch me on Fox 1025, do a Sixers podcast and NBA podcast as a whole called Picks and Roll with Sean Brace over there. So a little bit of everything, but the best way is probably to tap in with me on Twitter at Sean_Barnard1, where I do a pretty good job of tweeting out everything, but a little bit of everywhere for sure.
I love it, man. I love it. And to make sure, tomorrow when you do the picks and roll with my man SB, tell him we need to call somebody back once in a while too, because all of a sudden he lost my number for some reason. But nah, he's a good dude, man. Like all that Jansen and the crew down there, man. They do good stuff, man. But I appreciate. I know it's been a long day. You did pregame, you did live game, you did post game, and now you jump on with me, man. The invite's always here. I appreciate you having me on, and again, much luck to your success as you continue to rise. And once you get up to that peak, man, don't forget the little guys like me. All right, that's all I ask.
I appreciate that. Would love to come back on, and same to you. Best wishes and best of luck with everything. And definitely want to link up again soon for sure.
Yeah, man, definitely. We 100%, man. I appreciate it. You have a great night, and we'll catch up soon, man.
You too. I'll catch you, Tony.
All right, see you, brother. Man, that's Sean Barnard, man. Listen, I tell you, I bring the finest in Philly on here, man. Seriously. Like I was saying it not because I was trying to make the dude, blush or whatever, but he just spit off an NC State roster to me. Like,